Acts 3, after I danced around him as he slept and wanted to let him know how much I loved his sweetness, where he had kept me from falling down the stairs by blocking the landing. And so I lifted my skirt to show him my privates, but he didn't respond, so I kissed him and startled him out of sleep. And he was old and cranky, but would never hurt his baby girl. But still, he snarled and bit my cheek, and I screamed, and I saw blood. And my mother freaked out and said that was it. He had to be put to sleep. She was sick of him. And then one day I came home from the park, and he was gone. Discolored odd shapes on both my knees from falling off bikes. Various neighbors in various Calgary suburbs would carry me home, and Mom would pick out the pebbles as I sat on the edge of the tub and cried. She'd pour peroxide or rubbing alcohol or maybe betadine. It burned like crazy, and then I would grab my knee and the pressure would make more blood come out, and she'd wipe it again and pour more blood, pour more blood, pour more till the blood stopped. Long pieces of missing skin on my shins from learning to shave my legs. Age 12, and I had no breasts, but everyone else was shaving in grade 8. And it was bad enough I had to ask Mom for a bra, and she laughed and said they don't make them that small. She was French, and they didn't make them so small there. And it turned out neither did they in Norway. But my friends from Dallas and Oklahoma had gotten theirs over summer break, and I couldn't go to gym class without one. My dad noticed my shaved legs first and yelled at me for being too brazen for 12. And later, as the years went on, he continued to scream at his baby girl, who was shacking up with everyone in the goddamn country, such a stupid whore. With his Canadian voice and whiskey breath, it became whore, and spit would gather as his face grew red, and my mom would hover in the background trying to keep out of it so no one would get punched. 2-inch line on the left of my neck. It turns dark when I'm tired or stressed. At 18, I'd been snorting coke for 3 years, and the sinus and throat infections had stayed. Doc never thought to tell me not to drink or drug on antibiotics. The next thing I know, they're biopsying for lymphoma, and I'm sure I'll die. But then it's negative, but the incision gets infected and explodes one night on my boyfriend, and I go into shock and end up in ICU for 5 days, where they lance my neck twice a day, and I first discover Percocet. Diagonal lines across the inside of my wrists, the left far deeper than the right. I lived in the freshman dorm for a minute till the photography teacher asked me out to an Animals concert in Philly one night. The next moment we were banging it out in his apartment or the darkroom all the time. And I got so angry when I found the naked photos of his ex, who was also a redhead. And I imagined if he took naked photos of her and not of me, he must love her more. He thought things I had done made me something evil, and definitely a whore. He said I was going to hell because I wasn't accepting Jesus into my life. But finally, I had enough of being a hell whore and had someone buy me whiskey, and took apart a safety razor and sat in my dorm room and sliced and sliced and sliced. The resident assistant was pissed to be awakened to drive me to the ER, and my roommate tried to hit on the doctor, and the college made me leave, and my mom confessed to me all her suicide attempts, and my dad said I didn't need a shrink because I was just a goddamn stupid whore who needed to learn a lesson. And the ex-boyfriend told my sister I was possessed by Satan, and she thought that actually might be an option. A deeper, jagged cut across my artery on my left wrist. We always fought, and he was crazy with hallucinations and paranoia when he smoked crack. And I'd already broken a 40 ounce over his head when he raped me. But that night, he just wouldn't stop, and I needed to feel something beside the evil bile from his mouth and brain. And so I grabbed a corner of glass from the broken window and sliced just a little. And the blood that spurted out stopped even him for a minute, and we looked at each other in silence. But then he started some more bile, and I wrapped it tight and got a cigarette instead, and burned my palm over and over and over. small whisper of a line across my pelvic area. When I was 18 months sober, she was delivered by emergency C-section after 18 hours of labor and no dilation. My brother and sister photographed it all, and one of them stroked my head as they cut her out of my tiny, sorry, I can't read. One of them stroked my head as they cut her out of my belly, and they held up the mirror so I could see, but the blood and guts made me woozy despite the morphine haze. And they held her up to me, and she was bald and sweet and lovely and looked just like my mother before she died. And I held her little thumb. 2 barely visible half-inch lines on my upper right stomach. I just thought I had bad luck with restaurants and food poisoning, or maybe an ulcer, but it never occurred to me to go to a doctor when I was lying on the bathroom floor for days at a time, puking out foam and writhing in pain. At 2 years sober, I took a chance. You goddamn poor, stupid hypochondriac, just like your mother. And I went for a physical. And a week later, they removed my gallbladder through my belly button, and I never puked again. 6 different small holes in my right hip. 3 of them still bright purple, 3 of them faded to nearly invisible. When the baby was 1, my hip started hurting, and finally I tried a doctor and then another and yet another. And they said it was nothing, or they said I needed a replacement, or they said do sports, or they gave me cortisone. The pain got worse, and I limped all the time. And for a while, couldn't even have sex, and the boy I was with gave up, and then so did I, and then someone made me go to someone, and I had surgery. And within 2 days, I felt better than ever before. But 2 years later, it started to hurt some more, and they did it again, but this time they drilled holes in my bones to try and regrow cartilage. And now every step hurts, and at the age of 43, I need a new hip. 2-inch vertical slot next to my spine at the back of my neck. A disc ruptured while I worked out, and the next day I went for a job interview on Vicodin, unable to look at the executive who asked me questions, and certainly unable to smile. A year later, it's re-ruptured, and I'm waiting for spinal fusion and yet another line on the front of my neck. I will be taken to the hospital by a man who never called me a stupid whore, or a cunt, or a bitch, and who has cared for me through 2 other surgeries, and who held my hand when I cried in pain before the meds kicked in, and who lets me rest whenever it hurts, and who doesn't think I'm possessed, and who has never tried to rape me, and who loves my daughter as if she were his own. And sometimes he runs his fingers across my scars and loves them because they